Hello. So I want to talk a little bit today about video games, unsurprisingly. You can see I'm sitting here in my game room at the moment where I record all these videos, my new game room that I've just started putting together. And as I look at the shelves behind me, they are just filled with memories. All these different memories that jump out at me from different points in my life. Good times, bad times, hard times, joyful times, sad times. They're all linked to these different experiences that I've had with video games over the years. And that's sort of what I want to talk about a bit today, is the way media shapes us as we grow through those formative years of our lives. The way that TV shows and the movies we watch, the books we read, the comics we read, the characters that we get to know and identify with, and more specifically, the video games that we play, the way they impact us, the way they linger in our memories and make a lasting mark, perhaps even shaping us and our moral compasses and the way we actually develop into the adults that we eventually become. And I think video games in particular on this kind of point play perhaps a heavier role for those who have them in their childhood as part of their upbringing, as a big part of their upbringing, because they're an interactive medium. They're something that you engage with often for a very, very long time, often with just the one game for a very, very long time. And the way that interactivity can start to, start to shape your character to some degree. I don't think that's a stretch to say that video games tend to have an impact, a lasting impact on the people who play them more often than not. Now, I'm just trying to be fairly natural with this. I haven't written a script. I'm not reading from a prompt. I just want it to be just basically me giving you a stream of consciousness kind of run through of the games that I feel have shaped me as a person in the past, the ones that have had that lasting impact that I remember for different reasons, whether they were joyful experiences, whether they were because they were linked to a certain time in my life, a particular life event. For whatever reason, I've chosen these games to talk about today because I feel like they are the ones that have helped shape me into who I have become in some way. So, without further ado, hello, my name is Jamie Dean, and these are the games that made me. All right, let's get into it. So I've chosen 12 games to go through from my history of playing hundreds of different video games over the years. Now, these aren't necessarily my favorite games of all time, but they are ones I feel like have had that impact in some meaningful way, right? Just because, I didn't want to just do my top 12 games because a game I might absolutely love, but it doesn't necessarily change or shape who I was or who I am. These games I feel throughout the course of my life have had that kind of impact on me, for better or worse. And they're the ones I'm going to talk about today. So I've said before on the channel, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. We were often well behind the curve. Well, I feel like we're lucky to have video games in our lives at all. But we were often well behind the curve when it came to, generational consoles and things. Whatever was in the zeitgeist tended to be not what we were playing in my household. We were often a generation or two behind because that's what you could pick up secondhand at garage sales and secondhand stores or privately. They're the sort of consoles that we tended to have. And I remember our very first console that we ever had was the Atari 2600. And I remember being with my dad at a garage sale when he bought it. I remember it sitting on a blanket on the floor amongst a whole bunch of other shit. And he picked that up and looked it over and said, okay, does this work? Yes, it works. Okay, we'll take it. Now, I don't remember what year this was. I don't remember how old I was. Not very old at all. But I do know that it was sort of well into the lifespan of the Atari 2600 by that point. And we brought it home and it had a single cartridge with it that was the only game that we ever owned for that console. I think it was called the Smash Hits Pack, the Activision Smash Hits Pack. It had a series of 5 games on it. things like boxing, skiing, Frogger, you know, like all these old Atari classics. And they were fine, you know, they were something to do to pass the time. But they wouldn't, I don't think I ever really like, you know, they were very simple, right? And again, like the video game landscape had moved beyond those early Atari games at that point. You know, like the NES was out, the Master System was out, that, you know, there were other options available with, and game design had moved ahead of those very early arcade style basic experiences. So I never really clicked with any of them. I remember them fondly, but they were the very first video games that I ever played, were the 5 games that came on that Smash hit pack. But I wouldn't say that any of them were very formative for me. It wasn't until we ended up with a Sega Master System at some point not long after that, because I don't think that Atari lasted very long. I think it died fairly soon after we managed to get it. And again, another second-hand purchase was a Sega Master System that got brought home, and we never owned any cartridges for that console at all. We only ever played rental games. The only game for that system that we owned was the pre-installed game that came with those Master Systems, and that was Alex Kidd in Miracle World. Can we get past level 1? Surely with the power. It's those ghosts. The ghosts do me in. What am I supposed to do with the ghosts? Do I just jump over them? Yeah, he's got that, like, momentum-based movement that Mario has that I don't like, except it all... let's just not shoot that box. That's thinking, isn't it? Ah, crap! Shit! Alright. I'm gonna kill this bird. Yes. So this is, I think, the first game that I played that I would consider was like fun, right? Like this was more than just Frogger. This was like an actual game with you know, levels and level design and some more thought into just sort of like moving and nothing else, you know, like the movement wasn't the entire game. There were secrets to find and puzzles to unlock and things to collect, enemies to fight, all that sort of thing that I hadn't come across before. But I remember just loving Alex Kidd. The way that game looks is so iconic, and it's very iconic to me, that super hyper saturated color palette, the really rich color scheme, the soundtrack, the way that loop, that background loop of that first level just gets sort of repeatedly stuck in your head, the way it cycles over and over and over again. I just loved it. I thought it was great, and that's, you know, that's all we had to play really. So we played it a lot, and it was brilliant. Yeah, I loved it. That's, I think, where I started to think, you know, started to move from, hey, these games are just something to do to pass the time, to, oh, these video game things are actually pretty cool. I think I like this. I don't know how we managed to get very far. I don't think we did get very far in Alex Kidd. Like, I don't know if you've ever played it. The rock, paper, scissors bosses were total bullshit. You know, it was just like this pattern that you had to guess, because there was no internet to just Google what the pattern was back then. So you just had to, like, eventually learn and guess and find out what the pattern of the rock, paper, scissors combos that they would throw. But every time you failed, you were just dumped back to the start of the fucking game again and had to go all the way through again. So, you know, it was very repetitive as we slowly... I think we only ever beat the first boss, which was... I can't remember if that's rock or scissors. I think it's rock. I don't know how we managed to beat it. It was probably on a fluke. But that was about as far as we ever got. And like I said, we played that game a lot, man. Just over and over and over again, getting to the rock boss, losing and being booted back to the start and do it again, which at the time, I don't know how old I was, 7, 6, something like that. I don't know how old, but it was no easy task getting to that point in the game. But I still have really fond memories of it. I still can pinpoint me sort of pivoting towards gaming and playing video games as a hobby, as something I want to do, back to Alex Kidd in Miracle World. So for that reason, I think it's particularly special. So I've always quite enjoyed problem solving. Like, I don't like puzzle games. I'm not a big puzzle game fan. I don't like sitting down and figuring out, puzzles that have one answer, right? And it's less about trying to figure out how to solve the puzzle as it is trying to guess, what did the person who made the puzzle want me to do here? I don't tend to like those sorts of games. I do like problem solving. I like having a problem and then having to come up with a way to circumnavigate that problem or tackle this problem in some way that works for me, that's not necessarily has a single right answer. And that's played a really big role in my life. Without sort of getting too deep and personal, that I've had a lot of problems, we'll say, come up during the course of my life. There are always things that need to be solved, and I think that's true of a lot of people, right? Like that's one of the factors of the human condition, is that whoever succeeds at life, I think Sylvester Stallone said, is whoever can solve their problems the best. And I think there is definitely some truth to that. And I'm by no means successful, but I've certainly had to solve a lot of problems, and I've managed to get, I think, quite proficient in solving problems, in figuring things out with the tools that I have. How do I make this work? How do I get around this? How do I get past this with the bare minimum that I have? And it's just a skill that I've sort of developed and honed over the years, I think, just due to the lifestyle that I've led. But I think if I really think about it, it's like, well, I think where did that come from? Have I gotten fairly good at problem solving because I've just had to solve a lot of problems? Or like, is it a practice of repetition? Or can I trace this back somewhere? And I think if I sit and think about it, and I go back and look at some of the really early video games that I played, there is one that comes to mind that I played a lot of that was purely a problem-solving game, and that was Lemmings on the PC.
Small things amuse small minds, like the tiny critters in Sega's most addictive game yet, Lemmings. You can help them escape before they self-destruct. Or you can just sit back and watch the little guys explode! Lemmings!
So I think this is probably the first PC game I ever played. We have it on a floppy disk. And I can still remember the click and thunk of putting the Lemmings disc into the PC and booting it up, and just sitting there and furrowing your brow over how to get these little green-haired bastards from the door they're pouring into to the door that they need to leave with this particular set of tools that you're given. And I think what I love about that game, or loved about that game, is that there was no correct answer. There was clearly, by the array of tools you had, the game was sort of nudging you in a certain direction of, an optimal solution. But you could get those little guys from one door to the other any way you could, whatever worked for you. As long as you could get the majority of them out that door that you needed to get in order to pass the level, then it was a success. And I think, I played that game a lot, and I think that gave me the tools that I needed later in life to, navigate these situations that come up and navigate these problems that I have to solve, again, with the tools that I'm given in a way that works for me, not necessarily trying to find like a correct answer. And that game was hard, man. But it was really hard. Some of those levels, they start you off gentle, but that game got insane. But I still remember all the sound effects, building these little constructions and trying to find different ways to get from one door to the next. If something didn't work, okay, reload, let's start again. That didn't work, let's try something different. How many of these lemmings can I sacrifice? safely in order to help the ones that survive. You know, all those levels that you used to have where you had to build like tiled bridges over lava or something while they just keep running over the bridge and falling to their death, and you're trying to build this thing as quick as you can to get to a point where they're not falling in lava anymore. They're falling on solid ground and can walk and leave. That was always funny and frustrating in equal measure. But yeah, I think when thinking about it, I think Lemmings has certainly, given me some tools that I don't think I would have had if I'd never spent as much time with that game as I did way back in my very young sort of developing years. So I think that has served me well. So good job, Mum. I know she was a bit of a Lemmings fan as well. Well done in having that one available to us, because I think it's served me very well over the years. So eventually our Master System gave up as well. I remember it would not stop moving to the right or left. It was one of those, but it wasn't the controller. It didn't matter which controller you used. It would always just run to the left, and then eventually it made this horrific sound, and the screen went black, and it would not turn on again, and that was kind of the end of it. I think it was Dick Tracy we were playing on a rental during that disastrous day when our Master System gave up. So shortly after that, we ended up again with another second-hand console, this time an NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. And we had that NES for a long time. We took that NES all the way through to the launch of the Nintendo 64. So personally, I actually completely missed out on the 16-bit era of video gaming. And I was going to say I regret it. I guess I don't, because I didn't know what I was missing. I know what I was missing now, and I wish I could go back and experience that era, because it looks like it was, almost peak video gaming, the SNES and Mega Drive era. But I had my little 8-bit NES the whole way through, and loved it. Like this is where we started to open up access to more games. Like there was more stuff available to us. The NES was obviously very popular, had a lot of very good designed, well-designed games, a lot of very popular games, a lot of popular franchises. And so we started to be exposed to the wider world of video games. And I think when I look back, again, we only had 3 games for the NES, 2 of which we didn't get for a little while after we got it. The game that we got, I believe, came with it when we bought it secondhand. It was called the Maxi 15 cartridge, and it had 15 different games on it. It was this weird dog-legged looking shaped cartridge. I think it was intended that you would leave it in the system all the time, and it had this docking point on the top where you could put other cartridges in that would then stick out the front of the machine. I think that's how it worked from memory. But yeah, it had 15 different games on it. That was the only cartridge we owned for the system for quite a long time. But 15 games to us was like, that's incredible. That's amazing. We've gone from having Alex Kidd and nothing else to now we've got a plethora of games to play. And I think those early years on the NES, really started to show me, I was going to say, how to have fun with games. That's not true, because Alex Kidd was fun, but certainly how to have fun with other people. I think this was the birth of, as you'll see as we go down this list, my love of local couch multiplayer gaming. It started here with that Maxi 15 cartridge, and I can pinpoint the exact game that kicked that off. A very obscure title. It was called Rad Racket Deluxe Tennis 2. Now, this was just like a NES tennis clone, right? Like there was a bunch of these tennis games out during the 8-bit era. It's very hard to tell them apart, but this is the one that I had on this Maxi 15 cartridge. And my buddy Gary and I would sit on his lounge room floor, and I'd take my system over there, or take my cartridge over there when he eventually got a system of his own, and we would just play this game, rolling around on the floor, giggling like fucking lunatics, because we just thought it was, the funniest thing in the world. The way that the umpire would call juice, and we'd run up and like try and get some juice, orange juice off him, haha. The way we try and smack each other with the rackets, there'd be like little critters that would run across the court randomly that you could try and hit with the ball. It was just funny the way we get rallies going, and it didn't happen very often because Rad Racket was not the easiest tennis game in the world to play. It was not easy to get a rally going, but every time we did, it was a big exciting moment because it happened so rarely. But we just had such a good time playing this game together, the two of us. And this is where I started to go, you know what, this is cool. I like this. I like sharing this experience with someone sitting next to me. I like this two-player thing, this multiplayer thing. I've never played a multiplayer game before until this point. And so that sort of got me hooked onto that local multiplayer, that couch multiplayer, sitting next to each other, bumping elbows kind of atmosphere that really came into its own in the years to follow. And you're going to notice a bit of a trend now as we move down the list of just slowly moving in that direction, right? This sort of like jokingly friendly, competitive local multiplayer sort of gaming. And this next one is no exception. The next one is actually a PC game, and it's only a single player PC game. So right away, that you're probably thinking that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the next game is Deer Hunter. Now, the reason why Deer Hunter is on this list is because Deer Hunter was a very basic game, the original Deer Hunter, interactive hunting experience, I think was the subtitle or something. Very, very basic point and click game, but to us at the time, the way it interacted with things like, you could move around the map, you could use the tools like antlers and deer calls, deer horns and that sort of thing to try and attract a deer to you, picking your spots at different times of the year, different places, different weather conditions. All that was pretty sort of mind-blowing to us back then. Even though, and it was actually quite difficult. It was not an easy game because of the really poor, blocky, sort of JPEG artifacty, pixelated graphics. The deer sprites blended into the environments really, really well. Like it was sometimes surprisingly difficult to spot these things. But the reason why it's on the list is because it had something when you made a kill and you got a trophy, it had a trophy screen. And when you put your trophy of the deer that you'd managed to bag in the trophy screen, in the trophy room, you put your name under it, and it would have its like size and weight and all these sort of stats, and give it a rating or something. And so the trophy room was shared. So whoever, there's only one trophy room, and it asked for the name of the hunter every time you put a trophy into the room. What that did was create this sort of like meta game through my whole sort of immediate family, brothers, mum, dad, where we were constantly trying to outdo each other and show off, hey, look, I've just taken the top spot off you, your move, and that was incredibly fun. It was very, very fun coming home from school and going to jump on the PC and checking the trophy room and seeing that dad has bumped you down to the second place with this ridiculous buck he's managed to bag. How the hell did he ever come across a beast like this? This is insane. Immediately, I need to go and try and find something that will knock him off as well. And we're all trying to climb this ladder, right? Everyone's scrambling over each other to climb up this ladder over the top of one another. And it just had this, smack talking each other away from the game. It just created this really like, not hostile environment, but like a friendly, competitive vibe to the household during those deer hunter years. And I just think, that had a big impact again on the kinds of games that I would enjoy going forwards and the kinds of experiences that I enjoy going forwards. It all, I can trace it back to the beginning with Rad Racket but then really coming into its own in Deer Hunter on the PC. And I just loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I remember those years very, very fondly. All right, so after a long stretch of having the little NES, the little console that could, man, Nintendo can make them. That thing was reliable. That lasted a long time with a lot of play, without a single hiccup. Eventually, at the sort of twilight years of the 16-bit era in, I believe it was 1997, Dad made the decision that it was time to get a new video game console, to move into the current generation. And he made this deal with my next eldest brother and I, that if we could save up half of the money to put towards a Nintendo 64, he would pay for the other half. Now, this was like, bless him, this was a ridiculous, it was never going to happen. It doesn't matter how much we managed to save or how long, we never had access to that kind of money. But damn, did it get us to save our pennies away. And we would just hoard our pocket money, birthday money, any coins we could come across, whatever we could get our hands on. We would put away into this Nintendo 64 kitty, desperate to try and save up half the money for this console. Now, I don't even think we knew how much the console cost, actually. I don't think he told us that information. But at some point, we eventually, presented, I don't know, it must have been about $50 after a good near year of saving or something like that. And we gave him this kitty, and he said, "Righto, well done, boys. I'm gonna go and get it." And he sort of like acted as though we had saved up half the money for this thing, and then he went and purchased the rest of it himself. But I still remember that day. I still remember that house in 1997 that we were in, with its bare brick walls and its orange shag piled carpet, double story, sitting on the lounge room floor in the top floor of the house. And Dad coming home from the shop with this boxed Nintendo 64 console and putting it down on the floor, and us all opening it together. And that is just one of my absolute most cherished memories. Like I can picture it like I was there yesterday. Like it's memories fade and get twisted and foggy as you get older, but I feel like this one is still so vivid for me. And it was just a magical time, like a wonderful day that was. And he brought, with the console, he also picked up 2 games. And these 2 games would colour my gaming life from that point onwards. These games changed everything for me. And I went from liking games and thinking they were fun and okay to absolutely loving video games. And the first game that I could probably account with doing that was Mario Kart 64.
Welcome to Mario Kart!
Now, as I said, I missed the 16-bit era, so I never played Super Mario Kart on the SNES. Actually, I tell a lie. I did play it once at a cousin's house because they had an SNES, and I watched them play it and I had a go. But that was my Mario Kart experience, right? And it actually kind of made me a bit motion sick. The way that like the level would turn around the kart in Super Mario Kart, I've always found like hard to watch. And it was the case back then. But Mario Kart 64 was just completely transformative for me. Like everything that had been leading up to this sort of like getting into local multiplayer. I'm also playing other games like Double Dragon, right? I can't just credit the only 2 games that I've mentioned with local multiplayer. They're the 2 that I've picked out. There were other local multiplayer games that we rented out or that we ended up owning eventually. But it was all sort of leading towards this. And with the Nintendo 64 console having 4 controller ports, we were in a family of 5 at that time. No, just 6 actually. It was awesome. It was just like, it was the console for us. And I will just treasure the memories that I made around that time, and particularly around Mario Kart 64 forever. Man, I don't know what I can say about Mario Kart 64 that hasn't already been said. It was just such an incredible experience. It was so amazing to have 4 of us able to play the one game at the same time. And for it to be such an approachable title that anyone could pick up and play, that really leaned into that like friendly, competitive nature that we'd sort of, our family was sort of building around games like Deer Hunter. We just played the shit out of Mario Kart 64, like for years and years and years. If I had to pick one game off this entire list of 12 to be the game that made me, Mario Kart 64 would be that game, unquestionably. The other game that my dad brought home on that fateful day was actually a game I had no interest in playing whatsoever. My dad was a big PC gamer. He played a lot of those old classic PC shooters, things like Doom 2, Quake, all that style, Wolfenstein, right? All that genre of those early 2.5D first-person shooters. He was a big strategy man. Like, I got a love of RTS from him. Played a lot of things like, Age of Empires and Command & Conquer and Total Annihilation, Dark Reign, stuff like that, right? But he loved his shooters. He loved his first-person shooters, and I didn't. I had no interest in first-person shooters at all, right? I used to watch him play Doom, and I even tried it myself here and there, but I just didn't really have any interest. It wasn't a genre that was fun to me. So when he brought home this first-person shooter for the Nintendo 64, I essentially just kind of like shoved it to the side in favor of Mario Kart for a while, a decent amount of time. And then I remember one day sort of going, all right, let's just give this thing a go and see what it's like. Man. Obviously, at this point, you probably guessed that I'm talking about GoldenEye 007.
Do you know how to use one of these?
GoldenEye 007 is an absolute titan of video gaming history. It's one of the best first-person shooters ever made. It's certainly one of the best first-person shooters ever made for the console. I don't know that there was another first-person shooter on console available at the time that GoldenEye 007 came out. And there certainly wasn't a 4-player one. GoldenEye did so much for the genre. It changed so much for the genre. The way levels were designed, that sort of open-ended nature to them, where you sort of flow through a story, but you can tackle it in your own kind of way, in your own order. The graphics, just the way it looked, even though we go back and look at it now and make fun of like the boxy hands and the weird freaky photo faces, like, blurry photo faces. Back then, it was pretty amazing the way that you would shoot these guys and they would actually get like blood stains on their clothes where your bullets hit. That was mind blowing back then. It was just kind of like it was like seeing something for the very first time, right? And I eventually, after trying it and deciding to relent and give this other game that we had a try, just fell completely in love with GoldenEye, and particularly with its multiplayer side. Played a lot of GoldenEye multiplayer over the years, a lot of GoldenEye multiplayer. And I think GoldenEye 007 is probably one of the only games that I could claim, back then at least, to have gotten actually quite good at. I'm not very good at games. If you've watched any of the gameplay on the channel, you'll know that. I'm absolutely terrible at them. I love them all the same. But GoldenEye, man, I was a bit of a GoldenEye fiend back in the day. A lot of 3 versus 1 matches, a lot of smack talk, a lot of challenges, a lot of, as Sam has talked about before, that gameplay that just sort of evolves once you've exhausted the content, that creating your own games with your own rules, the ability to actually do that, to change weapon sets, limit weapon sets, pick levels. It was so good. And the campaign is an absolute banger as well. You know, like I love that campaign. And I think what's a magic about GoldenEye is that it has eclipsed its source material. Like, how many games can you say that are based on, you know, IPs, movies in particular, that are really any good? You know, they don't come around very often, and they certainly don't come around to the extent that GoldenEye did, where it is so good that when you say the word GoldenEye, most people will think of the game, not the movie. That's a hell of an achievement, I think. Totally eclipsed the film, which is a fantastic film, one of my favorite James Bond movies, but I'd never heard of it at the time. I didn't know what GoldenEye was. I knew James Bond was a thing, but I'd never seen the movie. So my first exposure to GoldenEye was through the game, and then watching the movie later on was kind of crazy, because you're watching, like, what you know of these levels that you've spent so many hours traversing, and seeing like the bathroom and the facility and going, oh my God, I know where that is. And watching Pierce Brosnan, you know, navigate the stairwell outside, and you're like, go this way, I know where you got to go. It was just so cool, you know, seeing the environments that you would become so familiar with in a film, rather than going about it the other way, which is usually how it goes. Was really, really cool, and I thought that was magic. So obviously that became a favorite movie of mine because I love the game so much, and I think it still holds up. It's still a fantastic shooter. It's still one of the best games on the console. It's still one of the best games in my opinion, full stop. Just love it. So again, those two, Mario Kart 64, GoldenEye 007, took me from, these video games are alright, to I fucking love video games. So I talked about my dad's love of the RTS genre and how he played a lot of those sorts of games, and that rubbed off on me, and I ended up loving that genre as well and playing a lot of those games, all the same games that he played. But this next pick, I didn't actually play through him. It was through a friend of mine introduced me to this, and he introduced me to it because he knew I loved this type of game, and that is Command & Conquer Red Alert. Now, I liked RTS games, right? I played all the ones that my dad had played. I really enjoyed them. But I think Red Alert was the one that made me really fall in love with that genre and fall in love with strategy, you know, as a whole, if you can say that, you know. The sense of humor that it had, like, it didn't take itself too seriously. It looked fantastic for the day, like those 2D graphics, and the snow, you know, I hadn't really seen snow in any of the other games that my dad played in that genre. It was just wild, you know, some of the units and things. It was just so cool. Cool is the word, I think, for Red Alert. It's just such a cool, it's just such a cool title, such a cool world, and this weird alternate history, you know, Nikolai Tesla sort of infused thing that you're playing in. This sandbox is just it's wonderful, and I just adored it, and I fell in love. And I played a lot of Command & Conquer Red Alert. I played a lot of Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. I haven't played 3 yet. I do need to get on that and try that. But those two games really sort of embedded a deep love of that style of game, that slower, more more relaxed, more methodical, thinking things through kind of strategy games that I've carried all the way up until now. It doesn't have to be, like GoldenEye, go, 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 shoot, shoot, shoot all the time nonstop. There was another genre that was completely the opposite, and I love them both equally. And I can trace that definitely back to that experience in my friend's house, up in his bedroom on his PC, playing Command & Conquer Red Alert. Brilliant. All right, so we're in the midst of our high school years at this point, and I love video games. The Nintendo 64 is going absolutely great guns. It's strong. There's huge arguments over Nintendo 64 versus PlayStation happening in the lunch breaks and which one's better. My group of friends was split virtually down the middle on that, so they're always spirited discussions. And it's not often, I find, and certainly not for me, where everybody is playing the same thing. Because half the people had PlayStations, half the people had Nintendo 64s. They had very different game libraries. Not everyone had a PC. Some people did. But it wasn't often that when everybody, I say everybody, when a lot of people have access to one game, that we all fell into the one game at the same time, and so could all connect over this one experience, this one huge shared experience. Now, I very vividly remember my dad's friend coming over one day and with this new game that he had to show my dad. This was when I was a little bit younger. I've got to show you this game. This is an incredible game, right? And they sat down at the PC and they popped this game in. And I remember my dad and my mum and my dad's buddy all sort of huddled around the screen watching this amazing new game that he brought over that he couldn't wait to show my dad. And me, being very curious as to what all these adults are up to, I remember walking over and looking at peering over and seeing the screen. And on the screen, there was a cathedral with a wounded man on the ground outside, sort of begging for help to kill the demons within.
Please, listen to me. The Archbishop Lazarus, he led us down here to find the lost prince. The bastard led us into a trap. Now everyone is dead, killed by a demon he called the Butcher. Avenge us! Find this butcher and slay him, so that our souls may finally rest.
And I remember my mum turning to me at that moment, just after he delivered the dialogue, and going, "Off you go, this isn't for you." So well done on the parenting job there, Mum. Good decision. But I was very disappointed that I couldn't see what was going on. Diablo was the game, obviously. And it was several years later that my dad then called me over and said, "Hey, come and have a look at this," and showed me Diablo 2.
And the evil that was once vanquished shall rise anew. Wrapped in the guise of man shall he walk amongst the innocent, and terror shall consume they that dwell upon the earth. Behold, the war amongst the heavens shall not be contained, and the sons of man shall be engulfed in the flood of conflict, and all hope shall be lost unto them.
Now, Diablo 2 kind of became, for me and my group of friends, a little bit of a phenomenon. We all fell into this game collectively. My dad was playing it, I was playing it, all my buddies at school were playing it, and we would all come to school and talk about what we'd found and where we were up to and what difficulty we were on now and what boss we'd killed and this amazing unique we'd found. And it was just such a cool period of time for us all to be collectively sharing this experience. We try and do speed runs together. We try and beat each other's speed runs. It was just so awesome, and I just love it. Diablo 2 is one of my favorite games ever. It still is to this day, and the height of its popularity back in sort of 2000, 2001, during those high school years, was just magic. And again, having that shared experience with my dad as well, we would you would play GoldenEye together, and you'd play Mario Kart together. You play other games on the 64 together. You'd play a round of a RTS or something like that. But they weren't really like a long-term investment. Do you know what I mean? So this is a game that I did have this long-term investment in, and that my dad had this long-term investment in, and we could bond and share, secrets and things we'd found, and show each other stuff, areas and whatnot, show each other items that we managed to find, watch each other fight bosses, and that was just a really special. It's a special game to me for that reason, and it's a special game to me because all of my other friends were doing the same thing, and it was just magic. It was so cool. So this next one's a little bit different because the reason this one's on the list is, I've been very positive so far about, forming good memories and having good connections with people and finding joy in doing things that I love. But this next game is on the list because this game I feel helped not just me, but probably helped thousands and thousands of people through really hard times in my life. This one provided more than anything else an escape when I just did not want to be me. I didn't want to be where I was. I didn't want to be who I was, doing what I was doing. And I just needed to go somewhere else and be someone else somewhere else for a little while. And video games are very good at doing that. Certain games I think are better at doing that than others. But this one in particular, I think, allowed that escape. I won't say not to an unhealthy degree, but it certainly did allow me to transport myself away from the situations that I was finding myself in at the time. And that is World of Warcraft. Now this is a game that, I don't need to introduce or talk about all that much. Everybody knows World of Warcraft. Everyone knows everything there is to know about World of Warcraft at this particular point in time. But I came into the game during the Burning Crusade expansion. I couldn't afford to play it before then. The subscription model just sort of always kept me out. And I think that's in part of the reason why I needed to be transported, I suppose. It was almost, paying that subscription every month almost became therapy, it was this therapeutic outlet from my situation and the circumstances that I was in. And I love it. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I will always remember World of Warcraft fondly, even though the period of time in my life that it's connected to is not a particularly happy or positive one. And I think that's okay. I think that's all right for games to be formative, not necessarily because they're linked to joyful experiences. But playing the game itself was a joyful experience. Being able to be taken away from reality for a little while was a joyful experience. And I stuck with that game for a good long while. I've tried to play it again recently. It's one of those things where it's just hard to recapture the first time. It's very difficult to. It's never going to live up to the first time you play World of Warcraft. There's not really anything quite like your first time playing World of Warcraft, and trying to recapture that even through things like WoW Classic, they just don't. You've done it. You know what I mean? You've done it. You've seen it. You've been there, and it's just never going to have the feeling that you're so nostalgic for, no matter what it does. So, I enjoyed it when I played it last year for a little bit. I had fun mucking around with it. It's really cool watching my daughter play it for the first time at the moment. She has fallen, deep into it, absolutely loves it. Probably spends more time in the character creator than she does actually playing the game, but that's fine. Whatever works for her is great. So I love World of Warcraft. I really do. It's very, very special. I love everything about World of Warcraft. I love the world. I love the characters. I love the art in particular. Samwise and Metzen's art was very inspirational to me during those early years in sort of late high school. And yeah, I just had such a wonderful time not being me for a little while, and that's why it's on the list. All right, let's come back up with a special one this time. This is a Zelda title. It's not my favorite Zelda game, but it is a very, very special one because this is the very first video game that my daughter and I ever played together, and that's The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. So this was like, I think, a perfect introduction to gaming. She was so young when she played this game. I think, 5 or 6 years old. But just had, you could just see the wonder. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm trying to, not get teary as I talk about it, but you don't see... you sort of miss moments like that as you get older. There's things as you become more jaded, more, more of a hardened heart, I suppose, more enclosed. You sort of like, you don't experience those moments in your adult life very often at all, I find. But sitting and watching, this child just experience this wide-eyed wonder at this world that she was able to inhabit and play around in and run around in, watching her develop hand-eye coordination, like literally before my eyes, being able to translate a two-dimensional control plane into a three-dimensional space. Video games, like, they have so many good benefits if you get the right ones for children. I've always been a big advocate of that, and I think The Wind Waker was a wonderful place to start her gaming journey, which has, taken her in much the same direction as me. She now absolutely adores gaming, probably even more than me, and it's just been wonderful to see. And we can trace it all back to her and I sitting on the couch playing through Wind Waker together. Riding that boat around where she can't really get into too much trouble, getting onto islands, exploring, going through the story, the cute art, the wonderful characters, the wonderful writing, doing all the funny voices and things. It was just magic. And just recently, we have replayed through the HD version of Wind Waker, and that has been really, really cool to do that together again. Nearly 10 years later at this point, to re-experience that world and re-experience those memories has been wonderful. So yeah, a very special one for me. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker absolutely deserves to be on this list because I think it was just one of those amazing experiences that I don't think I'll ever have again. So as we go through this list, the titles, they get longer and longer. Like, there's more distance between each title because by this point I'm an adult. I've got a child. I've got all the responsibilities that come with being an adult, and so the formative years are largely behind me. But I don't think they ever truly go away. I think you are a disciple of knowledge through your entire existence, and you are always growing and changing, and you should strive, I think, to grow and change right throughout your life. There shouldn't be well, this is me now and this is how I am. That's my opinion anyway. And I think this next game really showed me something that I needed to learn in adulthood, and it was a lesson that I needed to have in order to move forward as a fully emotionally developed adult man, right? And emotions are not something that I think get talked about very much in adult male culture, often to our detriment. And I think I certainly was in a position, it was a couple of things, it was a culmination of, relationships I'd been in, my upbringing, the way that I was raised. It was a different time, and showing emotions, investing in emotions, feeling like you can be allowed to feel emotions as a male was certainly not something that was ever encouraged, let's say, to me for a long time. And that sort of, carried itself all the way up to me playing this particular game, which was for me an incredibly special moment, because I think there was this bottled up from all these, again, problems that had to be solved over the course of my life, and all these situations that I found myself in, and tried to be stalwart and resolute and stone-faced and get on with it, and, stiff up a lip. If you're not bleeding, you're fine, carry on, you're a man, damn it, sort of thing. It's not a healthy way to think. It's not a healthy way to live. It's not a healthy way to be for anybody. And I think there needed to be a point where the dam broke. And I think this game helped that dam to break. And it's an incredibly special title that I think everyone should go and try. And it's a tiny little indie game by Ken Gao called To the Moon. Now, To the Moon is a beautiful experience. It is, for me, it was a completely transformative experience. It's an experience that I've had multiple times now, because I've replayed it several times, sharing it with different people in my life. And I think it changed me. I think it really did change how I look at emotion, and how I allow myself to feel and express different emotions. For the better, absolutely. To the Moon is just a tiny little single play narrative experience. It's about 3 hours long. You can do it in one sitting if you like. And I don't want to talk about too much, because I don't want to spoil it, because I think this game is best experienced going in blind, like I did, knowing nothing about it, having no idea what you're getting yourself in for. But just be warned that if you like these types of games, things like Gone Home, like Firewatch, Dear Esther, all those sorts of, those walking simulators, for lack of a better word. If you like that genre of games, like I have grown to do, this game may ruin them all for you. Because after playing it, for me, they all kind of get compared to the Moon. And that's not necessarily a healthy way to be. But To the Moon is just so good, I thought, anyway. And I don't want to talk it up too much, because I don't want to set everyone up for disappointment. But it left an impact on me, and it's a game that you will think about long after you've finished playing it. The briefest of brief overviews is that you are following the story of two medical scientists who are basically helping people at the end of their life to rectify some regret that they have. Now, obviously, they physically can't do this, but just in their mind, rework their memories to unburden them of this grief, or unburden them of this regret that they might be carrying, so that they remember their life in a different way to what actually happened. And I won't say any more than that. I probably shouldn't have even said that, to be honest. But just go in, sit down. A wonderful game to play through with a loved one. If you've got a significant other, someone special to you in your life, share this experience with them. Allow yourself to be open emotionally. I've played it 3 or 4 times now. I have cried every single time that I play it. Even thinking about it makes me a bit teary and croaky voiced. But it is just such a beautiful, beautiful game, and I think it's one that everyone should. If you like games as a media, if you like storytelling and narrative experiences as a media, To the Moon is one that you should not miss out on. And my last game that made me is a little bit of a surprising one, actually, because it's not a new game. It's not a recent game. It's a very old game, and yet it has fallen into this slot on the list now, like in my current age where I'm at in my life right now. This one has gained. It already held a very significant, position in my memories and in my life, but it has gained. It's a weird one to describe. It's gained a level of importance and a level of poignance. Is that a word? I don't think so, but it's just become very thought-provoking as an adult, because it's a game that I played as a child and loved for one reason and experienced it in one particular way. And now as an adult, I see it through a completely different lens, and the message and the moral of the story that it is trying to tell has so much more weight and gravity than it ever did as a child. And that is such a meta experience to have, because the game I'm talking about is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. So I'm getting older, right? I'm nearly 40 years old at this point, and when you get to this age, I feel you start to look at things differently. You start to look backwards. I mean, look around me. I'm surrounded by memories from different times, easier times, and with Ocarina of Time in particular, the reason why this one is so interesting is because the way the narrative of the story reflects my reality now, having experienced it. Now, that's a really weird statement to wrap your head around, I understand. I'll try and explain. So obviously, the big moral of Ocarina of Time is with growing up, right? That's what the story is about. It's about youth and losing it, and how you can never really truly get it back again. You can pretend, you can pretend to be young. You can go and spend some time in that place for a little while, but once your youth is gone, it's gone, and it doesn't matter how much you go back and pretend. It's never true. You're never truly going to get those years back ever again. Which sounds like a really depressing note, but it's just so. Like, I didn't take that from that game when I played it at 12 years old. When I played it at 12 years old, I experienced that game through the eyes of young Link. And like with this childlike wonder of everything, and every place that you go to, every area that you experience, every enemy that you fight was just this wonderful, wide-eyed experience you are having in this incredible world. And when you got to be adult Link, oh, you're such a badass, you know? It's, oh, I can't wait to be an adult. This is so, look at all the cool things you can do as an adult. You get all these cool toys to play with. You get, like, you look awesome, and you get to go to these crazy fucking places that are, like, scary and dangerous, and you get to just fucking kick ass, and it's just awesome. Being an adult is awesome. And then at the end of the game, you know, you put the sword back and you revert back to your younger self, and Navi leaves because you are pretending. You can never truly go. You've lost your innocence. You've lost your youth. You're now pretending to be a child because you've seen the world through the eyes of an adult. You've been an adult, and that innocence of youth is gone. And now as an adult, looking back at that message, you know, just like adult Link, it's just kind of, I hesitate to use the word surreal, but it's a bit of a mind-bending sort of thought exercise. And one that I feel has more and more of an impact on me the older and older I get. What that game is trying to tell me, I don't think it's possible to actually understand that game's message until you are an adult, until you have transported yourself forward in time and look back at it, much like the main character in the story. And that's like so fourth wall, you know, it's genius. I think it's absolutely fucking genius. And I think that's why that game is so incredibly timeless and will always be special to a generation of people. And I think it will continue to only get more and more and more special to those people as they begin to look back at it through the lens of an adult Link rather than a child Link. Yeah, it's a heavy one to think about, losing youth, and, you know, the fact that we can pretend for a little while, but time just, it moves forward and you can never ever go backwards. So that is my list of 12 games that I feel shaped me and my life, my tastes, linked to different events in some way right from the very early stages of my childhood right up all the way until now. And yeah, it was a really interesting exercise to sit down and think about this and think about what those games might be, and trying to choose the ones that I felt had these impacts, irrespective of my like or dislike for those titles. You know, again, like I said, these are not my 12 favorite games of all time. Some of these games probably wouldn't even make my top 100 list, but I can't deny the impact that they've had on me and on my life throughout the years. So yeah, I really enjoyed sitting down and doing this, and I hope you enjoyed me sharing this little journey through time with you as well. If you did, make sure you drop down into the comments below and let us know your games that made you, the games that you feel had a big impact on your life, and if you feel open to sharing why they had such a big impact on you and you feel like they have played some part in forming who you are. I'd love to read about them. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop down and click on that little subscribe button down there as well. We'd really appreciate it. Other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this little wander through history. Until next time, I have been Jamie Dean, and keep side-scrolling.